The Battle of Kalaren, 1771, in the age of the Vempethar. At the first light, in the enchanting realm of Orin, nestled within the southern expanse of Kalaren, the sun's gentle rays cascaded over the horizons, painting the forest clearing in a radiant, golden hue. Here, amidst the serene beauty of nature, Merjak, king of the Dragodem, commanded attention atop his noble steed, radiating regal magnificence as he led his legion from the front. With discerning yellow eyes he scanned the horizon, his countenance a scaly mask of resolute determination. Beside him, his faithful warriors stood resolute, their armor gleaming in the early light, poised to repel the imminent assault of the elven invaders. The king wore armor of resplendent gold, adorned with shimmering gemstones that caught the sunlight, reflecting his royal lineage and valor. In his clawed grasp he wielded a sword ablaze with fiery brilliance, its flames flickering like the wrath of a dragon, symbolizing his unparalleled courage and martial prowess. The Dragodem were a race of humanoid beings with a striking resemblance to their dragon ancestors. They possessed strong muscular builds with bodies covered in thick, scaly skin that ranged in color from earthy tones of brown and green to vibrant hues of blue and red. Their scales were iridescent in the sunlight, giving them a majestic and otherworldly appearance. Their faces were angular and adorned with sharp features including prominent cheekbones, pointed ears, and slitted nostrils at the end of a snout, reminiscent of a dragon's. The Dragodem had long horns that adorned the crowns of their head. Some smaller horns protruded from their brows or along their jawlines, adding to their fierce and formidable presence. The king, standing tall and resolute, raised his mighty voice to address the gathered warriors. "Fear not, my brethren," he boomed, his voice carrying across the clearing like thunder. "For we are the sons and daughters of dragonkind, inheritors of a legacy forged in fire and blood. Today, we stand united against those who would seek to desecrate our ancestral home. Let our courage be our shield, and our determination our sword. Together, we shall vanquish our foes and defend our sacred forests till our last breath." As King Merjak impassioned rallying cry echoed through the ranks of the Dragodem warriors, a wave of revitalized determination swept over them, invigorating their spirits with a mighty roar. Many Dragodem warriors raised their imposing war axes high, as was the custom, inspiring the troops to brace themselves for the imminent battle. Amidst the fervor of preparation, a ceremonial drink was solemnly circulated among the warriors, a potent blend of herbs and alcohol meticulously concocted to dull the sensation of pain while simultaneously heightening their aggression and readiness for battle. Even as they braced themselves for the impending clash, a sense of foreboding weighed heavily upon the hearts of the Dragodem. The eerie sound of the elven horns echoed through the air, signaling the onset of war and stirring a primal fear deep within them. For centuries, the Dragodem of Orin had clashed with the forest elves, their rivalry fueled by generations of mistrust and enmity. Now, as they stood on the brink of battle once more, the stakes were higher than ever before. The ground trembled beneath the pounding of hundreds of elven feet as the invaders surged forward, their weapons glinting menacingly in the sunlight. The Dragodem were undeterred, their spirits ablaze with fire of defiance as they charged into the fray, determined to defend their homeland at any cost. As the elvish arrows began to rain down upon them, the Dragodem raised their shields as they unleashed a primal roar, their voices blending together in a cacophony of hundreds of defenders. With the fury of a relentless storm, Dragodem berserkers surged forward, their massive axes carving through enemy ranks like reapers in a field of flesh. Each swing of their weapons sent blood spraying, painting the ground crimson with the spilled lifeblood of their foes, sending the souls of the elves back to their goddess. Beside them, warriors moved with ruthless efficiency, their blades dripping with gore as they cut down their elven adversaries with savage brutality. Arrows rained down like a deadly hail, tearing through flesh and bone with merciless perfection. Emerging from the ranks, a group of Dregadem enchanters, adorned in robes and clad in armor, moved with fluid grace as they danced amidst the tumult of battle. Their movements were mesmerizing, each step imbued with the power of the elements they commanded. With elegant gestures, they summoned whirlwinds that lifted the elves off their feet, leaving them disoriented and vulnerable. The enchanters' voices rose in a melodic incantation, weaving spells that enveloped the battlefield in a shimmering, ethereal aura of elemental protection. As the elves struggled to regain their footing, they found themselves ensnared in vines that erupted from the earth, restraining their movements and rendering some of them helpless. Meanwhile, the Dregadem warriors fought with renewed vigor, emboldened by the enchanter's magic. Spells crackled and spat, unleashing torrents of arcane energy that incinerated everything in their path, leaving naught but ash and charred remains in their wake. The warriors' faces twisted into snarls of bloodlust as they carved their way through the enemy ranks. With each foe that fell beneath their blades and spells, they revealed in the crimson ecstasy of battle, their war cries drowning out the anguished screams of the dying. The elves moved with grace and agility, their movements like fluid poetry in the midst of war. With bows drawn, taut, and swords flashing in the sunlight, they advanced upon the Dregadem with silent clarity, their eyes glinting with a cold determination. Their archers unleashed a relentless barrage of arrows that cut through the air like vengeful spirits, finding their marks with deadly accuracy. Each bolt found its target with lethal precision, piercing through armor and flesh alike, leaving a trail of fallen Dregadem in their wake of bloodshed. Meanwhile, the elven swordsmen danced through the melee with blinding speed, their blades slashing and stabbing with ruthless efficiency. They moved with fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural, their strikes finding the weak points in their enemies' defenses with uncanny accuracy. But it was the elven sorcerers who proved to be the most formidable adversaries. With a mere flick of their wrists, they unleashed torrents of arcane energy that tore through the ranks of the Dregadem. Fireballs exploded amidst the enemy lines, engulfing warriors in searing flames, while bolts of lightning cracked and spat off the tips of their blackened fingers, leaving smoldering corpses in their wake. The Dregadem fought valiantly against the elven onslaught, their warriors displaying unmatched courage and resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. But for every foe they struck down, two more seemed to take their place, their numbers and ferocity seemingly endless. Caught between the relentless arrows of the elven archers and the deadly blades of their swordsmen, and the devastating spells of their sorcerers, the Dregadem found themselves fighting a losing battle. Their ranks began to falter under the unrelenting assault, their defenses crumbling like sandcastles before the tide. At the forefront of the battle, King Murjak wielded his legendary sword, Iorvarax, an artifact forged from the essence of ancient corrupted fire elemental of Zudin. The blade wreathed in flames, danced with deadly grace as it cleaved through the ranks of the elven invaders. With fury in his eyes, the king drove his blazing sword into an unfortunate elf, impaling them and engulfing their body in flames. The elves, with their lethal exactitude and relentless assault, closed in on the magnificent king, their blades glinting with malice as they sought to claim his life. Despite his valor and unmatched skill, King Murjak found himself overwhelmed by the sheer number of his foes as he found himself surrounded. With a guttural cry, an elven warrior surged forward with his sword slashing through the air with lethal precision. King Murjak reacted swiftly, parrying the blow with a deft movement that sent the elf's head rolling to the ground in a glorious arc of blood. With each swing of the blade, torrents of searing flames erupted, engulfing the enemy ranks in an inferno of destruction. The very air crackled with the intensity of the king's power as he unleashed a devastating display of elemental might upon his foes. In a breathtaking spectacle of prowess, King Murjak raised his blazing sword high into the air, channeling the ancient fire elemental's power through the enchanted weapon. With a thunderous roar, he unleashed a wave of scorching flames that surged forth like a tidal wave, sweeping across the battlefield with unstoppable force. The elven invaders, caught off guard by the sheer magnitude of the king's power, faltered in their advance as they were consumed by the raging inferno. Their cries of anguish were drowned out by the roar of the flames as Iorvarax continued to blaze with otherworldly intensity, leaving nothing but smoldering wreckage in its wake. With each devastating strike, the king carved a path of destruction through the enemy lines, his sword ablaze with the fury of 1,000 suns. The very ground trembled beneath his feet as he pressed forward, a relentless force of nature fueled by righteous fury. With each swing of the blade, King Merjak felt a draining sensation coursing through his veins, as if the very essence of his life force were being siphoned away to fuel the relentless power of Iorvarax. The once mighty monarch, fueled by righteous fury and undying resolve, now found himself growing weary under the burden of his own magical prowess. As King Merjak continued to wield the blazing sword, his movements became sluggish and labored, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he struggled to maintain his footing amidst the chaos of the battlefield. The flames of Iorvarax, once a symbol of his strength and power, now seemed to flicker and wane, their brilliance dimming with each passing moment. Sensing an opportunity in elven invaders, pressed their advantage, launching a relentless assault upon the fatigued king. Despite his valiant efforts to hold them at bay, King Merjak found himself gradually being overwhelmed by the sheer force of their assault. Before he could muster the strength to retaliate, another elf seized the moment and lunged forward with deadly accuracy. With a sickening squelch, the elf's blade found a gap in the king's defenses, piercing through flesh and bone with merciless efficiency. The terrible sound of metal meeting flesh echoed through the clearing as the elven blade pierced the king's armor, finding its mark with chilling accuracy. The king's eyes widened in shock and disbelief as he staggered backward, blood staining his golden armor. As the king tried to retaliate, yet he could feel from somewhere a force halted his movement by paralyzing him with a powerful spell. The gripping spell only lasted for an instant, and quickly the king was able to break free. Amidst the chaotic battleground, the forest elves' champion, an elite sorcerer, emerged, his eyes ablaze with a potent mixture of fury and determination. As he caught sight of the king of the Dragodem lying wounded, and a fierce spirit of cruelty surged within him. He could smell the blood of the monarch, and he could taste the glory. With each step forward, the ground seemed to quake beneath the sorcerer's feet, echoing the thunderous beating of his heart. The metallic tang of blood hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of the impending clash. Summoning a shimmering barrier of crackling arcane energy, the powerful elf enclosed himself and the fallen monarch, setting the stage for their fateful duel. As the battlefield fell silent in anticipation, the warrior sorcerer stood poised for battle, his longsword crackling with power. "Prepare yourself, King Merjak," he thundered, his voice carrying across the battleground like a clarion call. "Today marks the end of your reign and the rise of the forest elves as true champions of the realm." In response, the severely wounded King Merjak unleashed a searing torrent of fiery breath, his draconic form ablaze with ferocity. Yet the opposer stood firm, his resolve unyielding as he deftly parried each attack with the skill of a seasoned warrior. In a wondrous spectacle of prowess and resolve, the elven warrior's blade wove through the air with grace and purpose, a fleeting vision of ethereal beauty amidst the chaos of battle. With every stroke, the veil separating triumph from adversity dwindled, drawing the conflict to a precipice of fate. Each strike carried the weight of ages past, echoing the struggles of heroes long gone. As the chasm between victory and defeat narrowed with each passing moment, sheathing his sword, and with pre-calculated resolve, the sorcerer surged forward, his hands darting with lightning speed to grasp the faltering king by the throat. and in a sudden burst of movement, the tall hooded figure snatched the flaming sword from the king's grasp, hesitating only momentarily before relenting to the champion's resolve, wrenching the weapon free with a strength fueled by righteous purpose. King Murjak gasped in agony, his attempts to conjure fire from within thwarted by the tightening grip. With a vicious slash of his claws, the king aimed to fend off the assailant, leaving a trail of crimson across the elf's face. Yet it was futile. The monarch's struggles were but feeble against the unyielding hold of the elf, whose grasp remained as unyielding as iron, his countenance obscured by a mask of blood and searing pain. Eyes ignited with fiery intensity gleaming against the flickering light of the blazing sword, the sorcerer raised the weapon aloft, its flames casting ominous shadows across its gleaming blade. In one fluid motion he brought the sword down upon the fallen king, the fiery edge piercing his flesh with searing intensity that could be heard with a hiss. Within moments the king was engulfed in flames, his body consumed by the inferno until nothing remained but a pile of smoldering ash. The Forest Elves' champion stood triumphant, his task complete and his vengeance exacted. Cries of agony and defiance echoed through the forest, drowned out only by the clash of steel and the roar of the flames. In the grip of the chaos, a voice suddenly pierced through the discord, shouting, "The king is dead!" In that moment, the sun seemed to darken and the forest fell silent. The magnificent king breathed his last, his noble heart stilled by the cruel hands of his enemies. The forest seemed to hold its breath, as if the news spread, a heavy silence descending upon the battlefield. The Dragodem warriors almost paused in their fight, with their hearts heavy with grief as they realized the extent of their loss. Around them, the sounds of battle seemed to fade into the background, replaced by mournful whispers of the wind through the trees. The forest wept for its fallen king, and the echoes of his valiant deeds faded into the twilight, a tragic end to a once glorious reign. As the sun sank lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield, the future of the Dragodem teetered on the edge. With each passing moment, their numbers dwindled, their courage waned, and their hope faded like a dying ember in the night. As the dark clouds of despair loomed overhead, casting their ominous shadow upon the beleaguered defenders, a resounding roar pierced the stillness of the forest, resonating through the ancient trees with a primal force that shook the very earth beneath their roots. From the sky, descending with the grace of a divine avenger, came the savior they had long prayed for, a majestic dragon, its sleek form adorned with dark yet iridescent scales that shimmered like molten silver in the dappled sunlight, its regal horns gleaming like polished ivory against the backdrop of the sky. With a thunderous roar that echoed across the land, the guardian dragon unleashed its fury upon the elven invaders, the very air crackling with the intensity of its wrath. Flames danced along its serpentine form, casting an iridescent glow in a dazzling display of prismatic hues. Even the elven host, taken aback by their sudden onslaught, faltered in their advance, their ranks thrown into disarray by the sheer force of the dragon's onslaught. Some stumbled and fell, their armor gleaming dully amidst the chaos, while others turned and fled, their hearts gripped by a primal fear they could not comprehend. In the face of such elemental fury, they were pitted against a force of nature, their vaunted strength and skill rendered impotent in the face of such divine wrath. As the guardian dragon persisted in unleashing destruction upon the invaders, their eyes ablaze with unwavering determination, the Dragodem seized the opportunity to rally around their protector. Inspired by its presence, their spirits soared, imbued with newfound resolve. With a resounding roar, the guardian dragon spearheaded the charge against the encroaching foes, its colossal wings casting a looming shadow over the battlefield as it unleashed its formidable wrath upon their ranks. As the relentless conflict wore on, the once stalwart elvish sorcerers found themselves weary and worn amidst the chaos. Suddenly, a resounding blast of trumpets pierced through the din, echoing throughout the timeless expanse of the ancient forest. In response to this clarion call, two towering figures emerged from the heart of the woodland, Enigmas and Athunin, towering warriors and Aelor giants of legendary renown. Their formidable stature was defined by their massive, muscular frames infused with ancient magic of the earth, which bestowed upon them unmatched strength and resilience. With determined strides, they joined the fray alongside the elves, infusing the elvish ranks with their underlying power of extraordinary might. Rejuvenating the beleaguered forces of the elves, Enigmas, with his towering height and formidable strength, waded into the thick of the fight, his massive limbs swinging with earth-shattering force as he crushed any foe that dared to stand in his path. His bark-like armor provided him with near invulnerable protection against the offensive of the enemy, and his presence on the battlefield inspired hope and courage among the elven defenders. Meanwhile, Athunin, with his agile movements and keen senses, bashed his way through the chaos of the battle with deadly force of his club. His limbs swung, smashing down on his enemies with swift and terrifying power. With each blow, he sent waves of earth and stone crashing into the ranks of the enemy, scattering them like leaves in the wind. Krathen, the black dragon, descended from the skies with a deafening roar, his massive wings casting a shadow over the battlefield. With a glint of allure in his eyes, he invoked a magnificent celestial body from the expanse, its radiance aligning with his intent. Opening his mouth wide like a portal to the sky beyond, he unleashed a torrent of shimmering bright white flames upon Enigmas, the mighty giant, enveloping him with a haunting spectacle of searing death. Enigmas roared defiantly as the celestial-powered flames consumed him, his massive form crumbling into ethereal dust, swirling in the winds as Krathen's potent star magic ravaged his being in a powerful blast of white-hot heat and glimmering, sparkling death. The elven defenders cried out in horror at the sight of their fallen comrade, but there was no time for mourning as Krathen turned his attention toward Athunin. As the battle reached its crescendo, Athunin and the remaining elves faced a dire choice. They knew it was time to retreat. Despite their valiant efforts, the cost of victory had been too high, and they could not afford to risk any further casualties. With heavy hearts, Athunin and the elves turned away from the battlefield, their spirits weighed down by the loss of their comrades and the devastation wrought upon the ancient forest. With the threat quelled and their ancestral home secured once more, the Dragodem stood victorious, the heroic black dragon standing tall as a beacon of strength and protection amidst the ancestors' forest. And as the sun set on the battlefield, casting long shadows across the forest floor, the dragon folk gathered around their guardian, offering their thanks and praises to the mighty protector who had saved them from the brink of defeat. One of the Dragodem approached Krathen as he knelt down on one knee, his voice filled with awe and reverence. "Great dragon, you have saved us from certain defeat. We are forever in your debt." Krathen regarded him with a regal nod. "Rise. Today you and your kin have proven your valor in battle. From this day forth I shall lead the Dragodem as their guardian and protector." The Dragodem let out a cheerful jubilation, their hearts filled with pride at the honor bestowed upon them by their mighty guardian. "As your leader, I vow to guide you to greatness," Krathen declared, his voice echoing through the forest. Another Dragodem, their scales shimmering in the fading light, stepped forward. "We are eternally grateful for your bravery, O mighty dragon," they said, their voice quivering with emotion. "Without your intervention, our fate would have been sealed." Krathen dipped his head in acknowledgement, his eyes gleaming with pride. "It is my duty to protect my kin," he replied solemnly, "and I shall do so with all my strength and cunning." The Dragodem gathered around the dragon, their voices raising in a chorus of gratitude and admiration. In that moment, amidst the ancient trees of their homeland, a bond was forged that would endure for generations to come. As the evening shadows lengthened and the last rays of sunlight danced through the leaves, Crathen raised his head, his gaze scanning the faces of his people. "But our victory today does not mark the end of our trials," he continued, his voice steady and resolute. "There are still dangers that lurk beyond our borders, threats that seek to undermine our peace and prosperity." The Dragodem nodded in solemn agreement, their expressions reflecting the gravity of the situation. They knew that their newfound safety was fragile, and that they must remain vigilant against any who would seek to harm them. "We must fortify our defenses and prepare for the challenges that lie ahead," Crathen declared, his words ringing with authority. "But let us not dwell on the darkness that it threatens to engulf us. Tonight we celebrate our victory and honor those who fought bravely by our side." With that, the Dragodem erupted into cheers and applause, their spirits lifted by the promise of a brighter future. Torches were lit, and a feast was prepared, the sounds of laughter and merriment filling the air as they gathered around their guardian dragon. As the night wore on, the stars began to twinkle overhead. Crathen stood watchful and proud, his gaze fixed on the horizon. For though the shadows of uncertainty loomed large, he knew that as long as the Dragodem stood united, they would overcome whatever challenges lay ahead, and with the guardian dragon at their side, they would always emerge victorious.